She understood the system. She had spent her life upholding it. But when an overzealous officer pulled her over and refused to recognize who she was, the situation quickly spiraled out of control until justice had its own way of striking back. The highway was quiet, a ribbon of asphalt winding through the night. Faint streetlights shimmered against the glossy exterior of a dark-colored luxury car moving at a steady pace. Nadine Brooks had been driving for just under an hour, her thoughts still caught on the confidential report she'd reviewed moments earlier. As the newly sworn-in head of federal investigations, long nights were the norm. But this wasn't. The sudden flash of red and blue in her rearview mirror cut through her concentration like a knife. Her hands tensed on the wheel, her eyes darted down. Exactly 65. No swerving, no speeding, no visible violation. Still, the patrol car behind her refused to fall back. Letting out a controlled breath, she flicked on her blinker and eased the car onto the shoulder. Years in law enforcement had taught her, stay calm, follow procedure. She'd worked alongside police her entire career. She knew how this should go, but something felt off. The cruiser behind her didn't move at first, too long of a pause, too quiet. She adjusted the rearview mirror, trying to catch sight of the driver. Finally, the door opened. A man stepped out, unfamiliar face. But that wasn't strange. She didn't know every local patrol officer in the region. What struck her was his body language. Rigid stance, left hand near his holster, right hand swinging a flashlight as he approached. Nadine lowered the window, halfway, her hands clearly resting on the wheel. "Good evening, officer," she said evenly, professional, controlled. He leaned in. The beam of his flashlight scanned her face. Longer than necessary. License and registration. No greeting. No explanation. Just a demand. She remained composed. "Could you please tell me why I was stopped?" He chewed his gum, eyes locked on hers. License, registration. Still motionless, Nadine's instincts kicked in. The same. Instincts that had kept her alive in more than one dangerous situation. "I'm reaching for my bag on the passenger seat," she said. Still no answer. Moving deliberately, she retrieved her ID and revealed her federal badge along with her license. The officer didn't take them. He glanced at the credentials, then stared back at her. "Federal agent, huh?" She nodded once. "Yes, that's correct." Silence. Then, "Step out of the vehicle." His tone was flat, but the words hit like a blow. Nadine blinked. "Excuse me?" He stepped back slightly, his hand now hovering closer to his weapon. "I said step out." The weight of the moment pressed in. She had followed every rule. Identified. Herself. Remained calm. And yet, this man was treating her like a suspect. Like a threat. She'd seen this happen. Not to her, not like this, but in reports, in footage, in the news. She wasn't about to be the next name in a headline. Her pulse stayed steady, but her thoughts raced ahead. She knew how fast things could unravel. She also knew how to stay alive. But before she could speak again, the officer lost his patience. When his hand reached for the door handle, Nadine knew this wasn't about a traffic violation. Something deeper, more troubling, was unfolding. But she refused to let fear take over. She hadn't climbed the ranks of federal service just to freeze when it mattered most. She had trained for high-pressure moments like this, and she wouldn't back down. The metallic click jolted through her. Not panic, but a surge of awareness. Her left hand shot out, gripping the inside of the door before the officer could swing it open. "Step back, officer," she commanded, calm but firm. "You're breaking standard procedure." The man didn't budge. In fact, his hand clamped harder around the handle, his knuckles whitening. I said, "Get out of the car." Now she could hear it, the tension in his voice. He wanted control. Nadine had encountered men like him before, men who confused power with superiority, who thrived on intimidation, testing how far they could push. But this wasn't a boardroom or a courtroom. This was a man in uniform, with a badge, a sidearm, and an anger that simmered just beneath the surface. She held firm. "On what basis, officer?" For the first time, he paused. His mouth opened, as if scrambling for justification, but instead of answering, he stepped closer. The flashlight in his left hand pointed straight at her face, its glare blocking everything else. "I don't owe you an explanation," he muttered. She didn't flinch. "Actually, you do." The light didn't move, but his jaw clenched tight. "Lady, I don't care who signs your paycheck." Her heart stayed steady, but her mind recognized the shift. This wasn't just misconduct. He wanted her to feel vulnerable, to feel powerless. But fear? That wasn't something Nadine allowed into her bloodstream. "Then let's get your supervisor on the line," she said coldly. "Let's see if he cares." That pushed him over the edge. The flashlight dropped, and his other hand slammed the roof of her car. A loud, sudden bang split the stillness, echoing down the quiet stretch of highway. "I said out." For the first time, Nadine caught a glimpse of his name tag, D. Carnes. She committed it to memory. Her fingers twitched, wanting to reach for her phone. But she knew better. One wrong move could be fatal. She had read too many case files that started exactly like this. So she held her position, hands still visible, and met his stare with the same look she had used across interrogation tables. A gaze that saw through the mask, down to the man beneath. "You're making a mistake," she said. He gave a dry, bitter laugh. "No. The mistake was thinking your badge gave you the upper hand." That's when she noticed it, his stance shifting, his right hand twitching near his holster. He was thinking about it, considering it. The atmosphere turned suffocating. Then, flashing lights again. Another car pulled up, red and blue washed. Over the scene, another unit had arrived. For a second, Nadine felt a flicker of relief. A second officer meant oversight. It meant accountability, but the feeling didn't last. She saw who got out. Another white male, tall, broad, no visible name tag under the headlights. Carnes didn't even glance behind him. That said it all. This wasn't help. It was backup. The second cop walked up beside Carnes, his eyes scanning the tension before landing on Nadine. "Problem here?" he asked. Carnes smirked. "Just handling a driver who doesn't want to cooperate." Nadine said nothing, just for a moment. Weighing her next move, she was now outnumbered. And Carnes knew it. The second officer took a step closer. "Ma'am, please exit the vehicle." Not Director Brooks, not even Ms. Brooks, just Ma'am. She had faced threats in war zones. She had led raids in foreign territory. But this wasn't a mission gone wrong overseas. This was her country. And right now, it felt just as dangerous. She inhaled slowly, carefully calculating every possible outcome. Because if she made the wrong call, she wouldn't be writing a report tomorrow. They would. The pressure settled into her chest, heavy and unrelenting. The second officer shifted slightly behind Carnes. Silent confirmation that he wasn't neutral. This wasn't about law. This was about control. Nadine kept her fingers lightly on the steering wheel, weighing her options. If she resisted, they would escalate. If she obeyed, she would be defenseless. There was no winning move. "Ma'am," the second officer said again, tone calm but coded in threat. "Step out of the vehicle, now." She let out a slow breath, keeping her pulse in check despite every internal alarm sounding off. She had mediated peace talks where one wrong word meant bloodshed. She knew how to hold her ground. With measured motion, she reached for the handle, her left hand still raised, open. Carnes gave a small step back, just enough space for her to exit. The night air hit her skin like ice, colliding with the heat of her adrenaline. She was exposed now. Carnes loomed beside her, subtly shifting to block any angle that might be visible on a dash cam. The other officer stood just behind, covering the blind spots. She had no doubt they had done this kind of maneuver before. "Turn around," Carnes ordered. Nadine didn't move. "You haven't told me why I'm being detained." Carnes flared his nostrils. Suspicious behavior, he spat. What behavior? She asked. He gave a dismissive shake of his head as if she were just another problem he was tired of dealing with. Refusing to follow orders. A setup. Defiance would validate force. Compliance would be submission. She'd seen this pattern before. Then, without warning, he grabbed her wrist. Hard. Fast. Her instincts flared. She shifted back slightly. Not aggressively, but enough to resist. Get your hands off me, she snapped, voice sharp, cutting through the tension. He didn't let go. The second officer stepped closer. We got an issue here? Karnaz's grip tightened. I think she's resisting. Her stomach turned. The second officer reached for his radio, his mouth already forming the phrase that had preceded too many unjustified arrests. We have a non-compliant suspect, not citizen, not federal agent, just suspect. Then it escalated. Karnaz's hand dropped to his holster, unsnapped it, drew the weapon. Before Nadine could react, a gun barrel was pointed straight at her face. Time fractured. Reality narrowed. She had been trained for moments like this, facing drug lords, terror threats, armed standoffs. But this wasn't a war zone. It was an empty road, and she had no weapon. Her breathing stayed steady, hands raised, palms open. Every instinct screamed, move. But she knew exactly how that would end. Silence wrapped around them, thick and deadly. Then Karnaz broke it. Do you feel powerful now? Something shifted inside her. This had never been about a violation. It was about degradation. Her vision narrowed, not from fear, from fury. Not for herself. For every name she had seen on pages, in videos, in reports that ended the same way. Voices silenced, stories unfinished. She parted her lips, ready to speak. Choosing. Her next words, as if they might be her last, but before she could say a single one, a voice rang out in the dark. Hey, I'm filming this! The voice came from the side of the road, cutting through the tension like a lightning bolt. It wasn't just the words, it was the force behind them. Someone had seen, and more importantly, someone had evidence. Karnaz didn't lower his weapon, but the shift in his posture was instant. A flicker of doubt. A glance toward the voice. Nadine caught it too. She turned slightly, just enough to spot a figure at the roadside. A man stood near the guardrail, phone raised high, the glow from the screen lighting up his glasses. He wasn't close, but close enough. Close enough to film everything. Close enough for the truth to be undeniable. You sure you want to do this, officer? The man called out, his voice calm, firm. Karnaz's jaw tightened. He didn't respond. The second officer shifted. A subtle move, as if reconsidering his role. They weren't in charge anymore. Nadine saw it in their eyes. Panic hiding just beneath the authority. They had grown used to the dark, to unrecorded nights with no consequences. But this time was different. Karnaz exhaled sharply, his fingers still wrapped around the grip of his gun. Whatever happened next would define everything. Nadine had to act. Put the weapon down, she said, her voice cutting clean through the cold night air. Karnaz didn't move, his breath shallow, his eyes darting, calculating. Then a burst of static crackled through the second officer's radio. Unit 12, status, another beat. Then sirens. Faint, but getting louder. Backup, but not their backup. Karnaz's grip slackened slightly. The gun lowered, not holstered, but no longer pointed at her. He turned to the other officer. Get him to stop filming. Nadine's chest clenched. She knew what that meant. The second officer started toward the witness, his hand reaching toward his belt. No, not this time. Nadine stepped forward, voice rising like a blade. You touch him, and I will make sure you're charged with obstruction of justice, personally. That stopped him. For the first time, uncertainty filled the air. The power was shifting. Not fully, but enough. The sirens were louder now, echoing through the highway, flashing lights reflecting off the pavement. Squad cars skidded to a stop. Brakes screeched, doors slammed. The witness kept his phone steady. The red recording light glowed bright, like an eye refusing to blink. Nadine didn't move. Carnes still held the gun, but he wasn't the same. His confidence had cracked, the invincibility in his expression replaced by rising fear. More officers. Spilled from the vehicles, hands ready near holsters, but weapons still down. They didn't know what they were walking into. Then someone spotted her. "Director Brooks?" The name hit like a thunderclap. Carnes barely reacted, but the second officer went rigid. His mouth opened. No words came out. The one who had spoken, a lieutenant by the badge on his chest, looked between them. Assessing the scene, Nadine, with her hands still raised, Carnes with a weapon in his grip, the second officer hovering in limbo, and a civilian filming every frame. Nadine didn't hesitate. She lowered her arms slowly, not in defeat, but in defiance, in ownership. "Lieutenant, I want these 2 officers taken into custody. Now." The command was sharp, uncompromising. The second officer took a half step back. "Wait a sec." "Not another word," Nadine snapped, her voice slicing through his excuse. "Before it could even form, I know exactly what this was, and so does he." She nodded toward the man on the roadside, still holding his phone, still filming. The lieutenant hesitated. She saw the thoughts racing in his eyes. This wasn't a bad call. This was a scandal waiting to explode. Carnes seemed to realize it too. His fingers finally loosened, and he let the weapon drop back into its holster. The motion was slow, measured. But his face? His face burned with fury. Nadine didn't look away. This time she was the one in control. "This was a misunderstanding," Carnes muttered, barely audible. Like even he didn't believe the words. Nadine tilted her head slightly. "Great. Then we can clear it up at the station. Let's get internal affairs involved. Let's call the district attorney." "Because this isn't getting swept away." The second officer's throat moved in a dry swallow. His face had drained of all color. Finally, the lieutenant moved. He turned to another patrolman. "Cuff both of them!" Carnes snapped. "You've got to be kidding me!" His voice cracked, the sound of someone who had never been told no finally facing accountability. Nadine didn't blink. "You pulled a firearm on the head of a federal agency, Officer Carnes. Would you like to add obstruction and resisting to the charges?" She had spent her entire life watching justice get delayed. Papers buried, cases mishandled, victims rebranded as suspects. Not tonight. Carnes was still breathing hard when the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. The second officer didn't fight. He simply dropped his gaze. A man who finally understood he'd chosen the wrong side. The lieutenant turned to her. "Director Brooks." "Are you—" "Get them out of my sight," she said coldly. And just like that, it was over, or at least, this part was. Because Nadine knew this wasn't just about 2 rogue cops. It was about the system that had let them flourish, and that was far from finished. The cuffs on Carnes weren't just steel. They were the weight of years of avoided consequences. He stood rigid, his face twisted in disbelief as he and his partner were walked toward the waiting vehicles. He still thought this wouldn't stick. Nadine had seen that look before. Men like him always believed they were untouchable, until they weren't. She took a deep breath, centering herself. Anger wouldn't fix this. Action would. The witness was still standing by the roadside. Phone lowered, but still quietly recording. Their eyes met. "You all right?" he asked. Nadine nodded. "Thanks to you." He hesitated. "They do this all the time, just not to people like you." That hit harder than she expected, because he was right. This wasn't rare. She just had the position to do something about it. More officers had arrived now. Some glanced at Carnes and his partner with open disgust. The lieutenant who had taken charge approached Nadine again. "Director Brooks," he said carefully, "would you like to press charges personally, or—" She shook her head. "This isn't personal. This is structural. I'll be filing a full report in the morning, and I want internal affairs on it immediately." The lieutenant nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "Understood." She wasn't finished. "I also want access to their disciplinary files. Everything. Full transparency." He hesitated. Nadine met his eyes with a steady gaze. "If you think I'm letting this disappear quietly, you have no idea who you're dealing with." Silence followed. Then, grudging surrender. "I'll make the call." "Good," she replied. "Because this wasn't just about this stop. It's about all the ones no one ever sees." By sunrise, the footage had gone public. By midday, the Department of Justice had launched a formal investigation. Carnes was stripped of his badge and charged with assault with a deadly weapon. His partner, suspended indefinitely. The police department issued a statement, the usual, polished language designed to manage fallout. But it was too late. The footage had spoken. The world had seen, and the truth came with consequences. From her office, Nadine watched the coverage unfold, fingers clasped beneath her chin. The story was spreading fast. She knew what was coming. Press requests, statements, political spin, from people who would act outraged, while secretly wishing she had stayed quiet. But she wasn't backing down. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Normally, she wouldn't answer. Tonight, she did. "Director Brooks?" A pause. Then a voice she recognized. The bystander from that night. "Just wanted to say, I respect what you're doing. Most folks wouldn't." Nadine leaned back, a quiet breath escaping. "Most people don't have the power to," she said. Another pause. "But I do." And for the first time in a very long time, she felt something that resembled hope. Justice doesn't happen in silence. It happens when people refuse to look away. So if this story moved you, don't scroll past it. Don't stay silent. Speak, share, and make sure the truth is never ignored.